To many, Halloween Horror Nights is the premier Halloween event in the world. And in 2018, you had Halloween Horror Nights 28. Well, I was there, and I feel like I wanted to rank the houses that I went through. And by saying I went through, I have to acknowledge that there were some that I didn't get into. Therefore, I must acknowledge that Dead Exposure, Slaughter Cinema, Seeds of Extinction, and Blumhouse are 4 that will not be on this list because I did not go through them. And it's only fair that I don't rank them. Therefore, that leaves 6 to be ranked. So let's get going. We're starting off the list with an IP. And when Universal decides to do an IP, they usually do a great job at sticking with following the movie or the TV series, whichever it is. And they did that great with Trick or Treat. It hits every scene you might want in the movie, and it does it to perfection. The scenes, especially coming back to it years later, that stick out to me is the bus sinking down into the lake. But, you know, the other thing that Universal will sometimes do, and this will come up later on down the list, is it tells the movie slightly backwards. It starts at the end because they deal with the Sam fighting the bus driver scene at the beginning of the house, which is really cool because they can start you out with a really high action scene with a lot of scares right off the bat, and then deal with the kids, with the bus kids later on down the line, and that gets you to, as well as bringing you in with the Little Red Riding Hood, Wolf, and the Trick or Treat was a very weird take on a lot of different fairy tale things, and it was super well done. It was a very fun house. But the thing I remember about Halloween Horror Nights 28 is that when I thought about the houses, I felt like the lower houses that I have on this list were still very good houses. And whereas I could see a lot of people disagreeing with some of the houses I have above it, I'll give reasons why. And they might be a little bit too personal, which is why there might be some disagreements I could see people having. So the first original house on the list is going to be Carnival Graveyard, a broken down, rusted graveyard that has been abandoned, but the freaks are still there. And a thing that I don't really know if they used beforehand, but they were using a lot this year, and I didn't see them using in years that followed, were people on kind of like a high wire that would drop down for you. They were using it in this and another house coming up. But this house, whereas I could see a lot of people really loving it, the reason why I don't have it higher on this list is because when I really sat back and started to think about it, I had a hard time remembering a lot of things in this house. And I know for a lot of the people that are, big into Halloween Horror Nights, there are a lot of little Easter eggs hidden throughout this house. And that actually, I know, plays into one of the houses this year. Not necessarily Carnival Graveyard does, but one of the houses this year had a lot of little Easter eggs that were hard to catch on to if you didn't follow past houses and everything. But when you don't know those things, you know, you're just left to absorb all of the, scenery around it. And the scenery around Carnival Graveyard is very fun and very enjoyable. And there were great scares in it. It's just, did it top the 4 more houses that I went through? And as far as memorability, I just didn't think it was there. So I had to put it below them. This is the house where I think a lot of people would disagree with me. I like the character of Michael Myers. I like the Halloween film franchise. Halloween 4 is never going to be my favorite Halloween film. You kind of get lost with those middle ones. I wanted to really go through a Halloween house. And when I stepped into this one, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. But much like I said with Trick or Treat, they actually do a lot with this house of making it feel like the movie. And when you walk through it, every little thing in that movie, every memorable scene you could think of, is there. Now, you could argue how many memorable scenes are actually in that movie, but you do get a lot of good scares from Michael Myers. And I think more impressively, you learn that in a movie that is not a very good movie like Halloween 4, that Universal can pull a lot of effective scares and scenery and still give you a product that you are going to enjoy going through and enjoy, your time in that haunted house. Everybody that we went through the house with enjoyed that house. And I guarantee you everybody would not enjoy that movie that we went through the house with. Yeah, I mean, I could see people not liking that house. But I think if you just step back and didn't think about the fact that it was based on Halloween 4, I think more people would probably like the house. It was a good house. It was a solid house. I liked it. I think it was worth going through. And I'm happy I went through it and skipped some of the other ones that I skipped. Now for what I would say is the best movie house they did this year, Poltergeist. I mentioned how in Trick or Treat, whereas they follow the movie pretty closely, they don't always follow it from beginning to the end. And they did it the best with this house. You start this house at the end of the movie going into the ground. And that was easily the most memorable thing from this house, at least to me. There were several other memorable things, but I just remember going into the ground as if you were going into the pool at the end of Poltergeist, and you could see the house above the ground, and you had all the scares from the corpses jumping out at you, and then you go into the house and you're kind of going backwards a little through the movie. You see the guy ripping the face off. Oh, and the big puppets of that, I don't know what that thing is in the movie that's jumping out at you, but I mean, you have the little girl pressing her hands against the TV, and then later on, she's pressing her hands from inside the TV. I mean, Poltergeist was I think they like to do those old movies every once in a while. Whether it be Ghostbusters, in 2019, or Beetlejuice this year, or I know that they did The Exorcist a little while back. They did the original Halloween or American Werewolf in London. They do this a lot, and when they do it, I mean, it's impressive. And Poltergeist was just as impressive as all of those were. But it had so many memorable scenes in that movie that they were able to put in that house that I don't know how you couldn't be just blown away by it. Well, I talked about the best movie house, so I might as well talk about the best original house, and that's Scary Tales. The twisted, demented version of the fairy tales. And from what I'm to understand, I could be wrong about this, they have done this kind of house before. Well, this is my first time going through one of these houses, and was definitely a very, very great experience. There's a lot of standout scenes from this one, between the Rapunzel scene and pulling the hair out of the scalp it was looking like, or the Goldilocks scene where cutting up the bears, and the Humpty Dumpty thing where the egg was just all kinds of broken. I mean, every twisted version you could think of that you could do with a fairy tale, this was pretty much done in this house. And once again, as I said with the Carnival Graveyard, about them using people on wires and having them swing around, that was what pretty much kicked off this house. You had a witch getting swung around, and I mean, it was a really good sight to see. This was the best original house we went through. I had heard stories of the Slaughter Cinema house, which we did not get to go to because the line was held up. From what we had heard, that there were vloggers in there recording, which completely made the line a standstill when we were there. So we kind of hopped out of that line and went to Halloween, which, as I said in the Halloween review, I do not regret. But I think Scary Tales, even after watching a video of Slaughter Cinema, would have given it a run for its money no matter what. That house was just so memorable. I loved it. It was just a great house. And the number one, Stranger Things. I mean, I know that I had heard some people not be as high on this one as we were. But I don't know, but we all loved this house when we went through it. This house did the show right, I feel, in every way it could have, including throwing some jump scares that, got us all pretty good. I especially like how they worked the intro in, which I was not expecting going through this house the first time. The first time was the only time we went through it. The way that they worked the scenes in, the way that the upside down was in the house, how they kind of made that, like the particle, I don't want to call it snow, but the way they kind of made those particles kind of float in there. The way that there were so many of the memorable scenes in that first season of the show that they, recreated in that house. I mean, those random little jump scares. And that is one of the things I think that you leave, not just Halloween Horror Nights, but any haunted house, any Halloween event, that you leave those memories with. How did they, get you or the people you're with? And we still talk about one particular jump scare and how they got one of the people we were with in that house. So those little things are what stick with you. And yeah, you can say that's a personal experience, but that's not the only reason why Stranger Things is on here. It is the set design. It is how the characters played the characters in the show and how well they feel like those characters in the show. Oh, because in the next year's Stranger Things, it fell short. And I will be doing a ranking of the next year's, and you'll see where Stranger Things, falls on that year too. There was something about the 2018 Stranger Things house that really worked, and for whatever reason, it was just the best house. And everybody that was on that trip with us said the same thing. It was the best house. The entire crowd, when we left the house, was sky high on it. Everybody in front of us, everybody behind us loved it. I think that they knocked it out of the park. So, Stranger Things, it was number 1 that year. And that's how I'm ranking Halloween Horror Nights 28 and its houses that went with it. Now, to be fair, as I said, I missed 4 houses. I wish I would have went through them, but when we were down there, we were on a very limited time. We only got 1 night of Halloween Horror Nights. I did go to Halloween Horror Nights 29 and 30. Both of those experiences, we had 2 nights, so we were able to get all 10 houses in. And I will bring both rankings of all 10 houses of, those ones. So be a little bit more, rounded on that front. But, it was a great event. And to be completely honest, I didn't dislike any house. Whereas in 29 and 30, I could honestly say there were houses that I really didn't care that much for. But that's for a different list and for a different day. But as far as this list is concerned, I'd like to hear, if you went to the event, what your thoughts were. And let me know. And if you like this video, please like it and subscribe. Thank you.